Hello. Today I will be featuring the 0.6.4 Mogami, the 155mm Mogami to be exact, since this is of course the ship or the version of this ship that has gotten significantly buffed. For those that aren't aware, the old turret traverse on the ship used to be absolutely abysmal. It had a 51.4 second turret traverse, which means it was slower than many battleships, even high tier battleships, even tier 10 battleships. It had slower turret traverse than them, which of course didn't make much sense from a balance point of view and made the ship very awkward to play. I'm against tier 10 matchmaking, which sadly is becoming more and more common in tier 8 ships as of these days. More and more people are reaching tier 10s, and tier 8 is starting to become less populated, which means you constantly get upmatched, which isn't really that much fun. But regardless, this commentary isn't about that. It's about the new Mogami. So the turret traverse has been reduced to 36 seconds, which means the ship is much more comfortable to play. You can more easily maneuver while shooting because you can actually keep your turrets on the target while maneuvering it. In the past, if you turned even a bit too sharply, your turrets couldn't even keep up on the target, and it turned out to be very frustrating to play because of this. The ship is still just as squishy as it was in the past though. You are made of paper, you have a massive citadel. In this ship you don't really want to be tanking any shells. In fact, the playstyle I will be showing in this commentary is really my recommended playstyle for the ship. It involves being quite passive, very safe, because ultimately this ship can get deleted extremely easily. The first thing I do is, well, the first thing you want to do is find cover. You want to find some sort of island cover you can maneuver behind, because even in the open, trying to deal damage can be quite hard, because the turret angles on the ship are not good. The turret angles on the ship are honestly pretty terrible if you want to be using all of your guns. So that means you have to give a lot of broadside if you want to bring all your turrets to bear. And giving a lot of broadside in the Mogami is a very quick way of getting citadeled and deleted. That's why most of the time you really want to play it like an Atlanta. You want to play it behind cover, you want to borrow smokes from your buddies. In general, you want to stay undetected or in positions where you are extremely hard to fire at. I spot the Yugumo on the minimap, and there's some ships going this way, so I drop preemptive torps as I turn away. And no, I'm not going to stay here and engage them. I'm not going to stay here and fight them. That's not your job. You should never ever be the first guy into a fight in the Mogami. That's not your job. I often see Mogamis like spearheading attacks and stuff in random battles, and they're always the first ones to die. Because honestly, if I see a Mogami on the enemy team, I'm going to shoot at him. And many people feel the same, because Mogamis are kind of the Pensacola's of tier 8. Except, unlike the Pensacola, the Mogami actually poses a very big threat in terms of firepower, especially the 155mm Mogami that I prefer. So, a big threat and very squishy, you're gonna get targeted a lot. So you don't want to be the first guy in ever. You're gonna want to abuse your range, 15.7, not really much range, but you want to use that range to your advantage to give you more time to react to incoming shells and dodge incoming damage. You see there's a bunch of ships in front of me. I have no interest in going in front of them, especially in tier 10 matchmaking. Tier 10 matchmaking is a good example because of course all the threats are even further amplified here. Like even cruisers are a big threat to you. Hindenburg and stuff can just delete you. Zhao AP, Des Moines, all of these massive threats. Izuma pops up. I shoot, I get of course spotted. In the past this would have been stealth fire range, but that has changed. I slow down so he goes behind a cliff, and that way I am safe from being spotted, and I can just sit here and spam him. Now here of course we see the effects of IFHE. Now if you watched you see how much damage I'm dealing. In fact, if you look at the counter on the right, you see almost every shell I land on him is a full penetration. And this is the strength of the 155mm Mogami when you use IFHE. If you watch my IFHE guide, you will know the math behind this, but the Izuma, for example, is almost entirely clad in 32mm armor, and running IFHE on the Mogami allows the HE to penetrate this armor, which means pretty much any point I hit on him is going to be a full damage. You saw 11 hits, that was something like 5.6k volley. on top of a fire. So the sheer firepower, the sheer damage you can pump out in the ship is absolutely insane. If you run the IFHE build, I recommend. So that's of course the strength. But the weaknesses are fairly obvious. Turning circle isn't the best. I think it's like 750 meter turning circle, so not really that agile. The stealth is great. 9.3 km stealth when you're not firing. Almost as good as the Atago. Not quite. Atago gets to 9.1, but it's better than the ARP Takao that only gets to 9.4. So somewhere between those two is a good benchmark. Izumo sitting nose in, as I just mentioned, Izumo 32mm armor. So when you find battleships sitting nose in, this is when the Mogami, look at that, 6.8k damage in an HE volley. Mogami loves finding nose in targets, nose in battleships, because HE, of course, as I mentioned in my IFHE guide, HE doesn't care about angling, it only cares about the difference between your HE penetration and the armor you're shooting at. I got spotted there briefly, and that was actually very lucky that I didn't get Citadel there. Extremely lucky, because if that had been a hit, it would almost certainly have been a Citadel. The Citadel on the Mogami, especially underneath the smokestack, actually comes quite high above the waterline, so the ship is very easy to Citadel. It was because the DD on the left, I assume. That was the reason why I was briefly detected, so I maneuver further behind cover and I continue firing. You notice how safe and patient I'm playing this. Even though I'm still pretty much full HP, I'm playing it like I'm down to 5k HP. And that's how you want to do it in the Mogami, because compared to other ships, you might as well be at 5k HP. You are so very squishy, and the longer you can stay at very healthy, the more impact you can have on a game. Especially tier 10, where the less ships there are around, the more useful you can be. That's cruiser life in a nutshell. Spotted again. I assume DD is sailing past somewhere here. That was spotting me. Baltimore shows up. No reason to switch to AP, especially at this range. Honestly, with the 155mm Mogami, it's unless you are within 10 kilometers and getting flat broadsides, you should just be sticking to HE at all time. Against battleships, it's even safer to almost always stick to the HE, because the IFHE damage is just so punishing and so reliable. That's really one of the main reasons behind my enjoyment of this spec, is that the HE is, with the IFHE, it's highly reliable. You can shoot anything and you pretty much know exactly how much damage you will do. There will rarely be situations where the HE will actually let you down. What you do need to keep track of when you play the style that I'm playing here, using islands to my cover, is the white circle on the minimap. That displays your range, and because it displays your range, it's also a notification of how far away you can get spotted from while you're firing. So for example, you see the Bismarck that's coming up. I just peeked at him. That Bismarck is soon going to be within my range, which means if I fire, he will spot me. So once again, glancing at the minimap between volleys, highly advisable. You see I get spotted, I know the Bismarck is spotting me, so I maneuver between the islands. So even though he's within my circle of being able to spot me, I now have landmass between me and him, which allows me to stay in cover and harass this Izumo even further. The battleship recommendation that I had, that always look at your minimap between volleys, I also recommend it on the cruiser. You might not remember to do it every volley, but try to do it like every 30 seconds or so at least, so you have some awareness. The Izumo disappears, but my stealth has kicked in, or well, my firing debuff has disappeared. So I use the excellent stealth I spoke of, 9.3 kilometers. And your torps are actually 10 kilometers. The torps have horrible angles, but the torps are quite fast and very powerful, and of course 10 km, meaning you can stealth torp. I shoot at the Bismarck, note I shoot at him before he comes around the corner. That's why I'm undetected when I do it. Now I got a fire and he repaired, so I wait, because he's using damage con right now, and I'm waiting for the damage con to run out before I open fire again. Just patient play, taking my time. And now that the damage con has most likely run out, I start firing upon him again, because now I can not just do my IFHE damage, but I can also start fires on him. And the preemptive torps that I launched are just about to catch up with him, and because I burned his damage con earlier, any torpedo hit is going to be a permanent flooding. So at this point, this Bismarck is already dead. That was a combination of using the stealth, using the torps, and then using the powerful guns. Pretty much all the strengths of the Mogami in one. And there we also saw the weakness. Even though I was angled away, you're not going to be bouncing any shells in this thing. In fact, I was lucky that wasn't the Citadel that he hit me with. Now I got permanent fire and permanent flood, and he's guaranteed dead. And of course the Codeforce decides, well, now is my time to finally open up fire and steal the kill. Pretty common. Do I even want to look at this battleship? He's within C, of course. Codeforce with HP perk and full HP. Let's not comment on that at all. So at this point the game is already quickly ending, and even though it was a fairly short game, and what I've been shooting mostly has been battleships, my fire RNG has not been very good at all. In fact, my fire RNG has been horrible. 174 hits and only 5 fires, yet my damage is 140,000 damage against tier 10s, and I've been shooting either same tier or higher tier battleships. So that really sums up the sheer amount of DPM the ship can pump out. Even, I land what, 1 torp? I don't have the best RNG with fires, in fact pretty awful RNG, but because of the consistency of the IFHE spec, you can still deal so much damage. Across the Codeforce, I open up fire in the open, which is not really recommendable, but I want him to pick a fight with me, because the game is about to end and his only chance of squeezing out the victory or extending the game is killing me. But he flees. This is something that baffles me quite often with people, like, the game is about to end, you're about to lose, why would you run away? You're still going to be paying the same repair cost if you die or not, so why are you fleeing and essentially making your chance of winning the game 0? Very, very baffling to me, but some people play very differently than I do. Anyway, game ends, ultimately 144k damage, pretty shitty RNG, but when we use IFHE Mogami, we can live with pretty shitty RNG. I managed to top the scoreboard without getting a single kill, since all of them were picked off for me. Against tier 10 matchmaking, that is of course quite satisfying. And looking at the score, we can see my fire damage is actually only 27k, and flooding 12k, and then the sheer pure HE damage is 88, almost 89,000 damage. So that really shows it just how strong this build can be, because you can kind of ignore angling and you can most of the time ignore armor. There are of course exceptions where you will do significantly less damage. For example, the Codeforce shattered a lot of my shells, and that's because he has 50mm armor on parts of his ship, unlike the 32mm the Izumo has. Anyway, let's move on to my recommended build for this ship. Starting off, we of course have the modules. Now, the first upgrade I recommend is the range. Absolutely the range. If you can't use cover, you want to use range to your advantage, so having to stick with the default 14.2 is just way too punishing. So upgrade the range module first, and then when you can you can skip straight to the C hull if you have the XP to it. In the past I used the A hull because it gave better stealth firing, but since the removal of stealth fire there's no reason to really use it, and there's no reason to use the B hull over the C hull. The differences aren't big, it's just a small difference in anti-air, so if you want you can just go straight for the, you can go for the B hull and skip the C hull, but if you want the optimal experience then you just get the C hull instead, since it is the best hull now. Consumable wise, of course you don't get the gun upgrade, since you want to stick to the 155mm guns, since those are the ones that in my opinion are the strongest. Consumable wise, premium repair first. After that, you don't really need these too much, but I do prefer like the catapult fighter plane to get that additional spotting, especially since you like sitting behind cover a lot with this ship, since it is so very squishy. Upgrade wise, main armaments mod, you don't want to be losing turrets or torpedoes. AA range, in the past I used main battery mod 2 for faster turret traverse, but since the buff it's no longer necessary, and something like aiming systems isn't really necessary on a cruiser, since the advantage it gives is so very, very small, and you spam out shells all the time anyway, so you barely even notice the difference, whereas AA guns is a significant increase in AA range. Damage control 1, Rudder shift, absolutely the best one, since you don't want to be caught giving any sort of broadside in this thing, because the Mogami is very, very squishy. And finally, stealth. Stealth is your friend, stealth is your buddy, you want to be using it. Captain perks wise, priority number 1 is absolutely priority target, so you know how many people are firing at you. Turret traverse is still very, very important. It lowers your turret traverse from, is it 36 to 31.6, so a pretty significant increase. Follow it up with demolition expert, you want to increase that fire chance, and then you get concealment expert, you want that stealth, and follow it up with IFHE. This would be a 14-point captain. Once you have a 14-point captain, remember, of course, if you go for the IFHE spec, you will have to respec later on. When you go to the Ibuki, you will have to respec out of IFHE, because, well, 203mm guns don't really benefit at all from it, so keep that in mind. This is purely 155 Mogami spec. If you do prefer the 203mm guns, then just skip IFHE entirely and go for something like my Zhao build, which you can find on YouTube quite easily, because that build is optimized for 203mm guns. But if you go for the 155, then of course IFHE, and once you have IFHE, you can get Adrenaline Rush for your 16-point captain, and if you really want to keep on grinding and get a full 19-point captain, then the last perk would be Vigilance to help avoid torpedoes, because once again you are a very squishy ship, you have no heal, no nothing, torpedoes are very nasty considering 2 torps can pretty much kill you, and that would be my optimal 155mm spec. But other than that, there's not really much to it. The Mogami is an insane HE spammer, insane fire starter. The broadside damage it can pump out with just using IFHE HE is absolutely insane, but to balance that out, it's made of paper. It's squishy as hell. In fact, if you go to the armor layout and you take a look at just how much citadel area you have on the ship, you suddenly realize why it takes so much damage. It can be citadel from pretty much every angle. You can be citadel straight from behind, just plunging fire, punching through the deck. You can get citadel in the barbettes, in the front, in the back, everywhere. So you don't want to be tanking in the ship, you want to be avoiding, and you have to keep that in mind. Sometimes it's better to angle and not be able to bring all your guns to bear because your turret layout isn't that good. It's better to stay angled and not do as much damage and instead survive. I often see Mogamis who are very, very hungry to deal damage, so they give too much broadside just to bring every single one of their turrets to bear, and in return they get one shot. So you want to keep that in mind. Anyway, that was my Mogami commentary. I hope you guys enjoyed it.